Josh is ready? Oh. Okay, good morning. And a good gewenst Jahr. So we resume where I left off. So really it's a hemshech from last year, but every shir is self-contained. So I've been going through the whole Seder Shtalshlus and even higher than Seder Shtalshlus we started from Atzmus and Ein Sof, Lifnei Tzimtzum and the Tzimtzum and the Shimu and the Kav and the Elamus Adam Kadmen, Akudim, Nekudim, Vrudim, Atzilus, Tayu Tikkun, Bria, the Sfiras, I went through all the Sfiras, Chachma through Malchus, and many of the different dimensions of that. And then the last year was on Bria, Elam HaBria. And Havara, the transition from Atzilus to Bria. So, more or less up to the world of Yetzirah. Now, the way I've been presenting it has been not just to understand just the definition of each of these madregas, but also the necessity. Everything has a purpose. Nothing has to be. Especially by the Eibishter, he's not mukhrich in anything. So he doesn't have to create any world. He could just have said, I want to have a world, and you'd have Elam Asiyah, Agash Be'achum, the world we see. But as we know, both from Psukim and also from logic, that the Eibishter did create, Ulechvedi Barosav Yetzartav Afasisiv, as we say every morning, the Shomesh and the Sata B'Tahirihi, Ata Barosa, Ata Yetzarta, Ata Nefachta Bi, Ata Meshamra Bekirbi. So we see clearly that the Eibishter wanted the world to be created in Naseder and Hadraga, with order. Firstly, for us to understand it, because he created us in that way, that we're understanding and logical creatures. So we therefore have, let me just take, thank you. So therefore we understand things when they're structured. How Gufa Kasha, why the Eibishter made a different structure, not a different structure, that we'll never know. But as the Alter Rebbe says in one place, that Tzemach Tzedek quotes the Alter Rebbe, that Kachol B'Retzeinei, that it should be the Seichel the way the Seichel is Ata. Meaning how he created it, that we know. That's how the Eibishter wanted it. So, based on this Seichel, we understand everything is with a Seder. You can't go to step 2 if you don't have step 1. You can't go to Beis if you don't have Aleph. And the same thing, Seder Shtalshlus is a Mesudadika process. So in the language of the Arizal, for example, so the first thing was, before Brias Eilam, before the Tzimtzum, was Ein Sof, seamless. Achdus Hapshuta, or in the Lashon of the Medrash, the Yem Echad. Yem Rishon was called Yem Echad, because it's Achdus. Then comes a Tzimtzum. The Tzimtzum conceals the Elokus, and then all the pratim that are involved in that, and then just like a teacher has to conceal his intelligent brilliance in order for the student to be able to be present. And then the whole process that we understand, they say the Shtalshlus Elamus, Eris and Kalim, and so on. So what I've been doing is trying to explain how each part of Seder Shtalshlus is necessary in this logical structure. Firstly, for us to understand the Elokus, so that's also a mitzvah. Yediyas Hashem, Yediyas Elokus, Yediyas Habeira, Da'as Elokei Avicha, V'yadaita Hayem, Ki Havayu V'shavesa Levavecha, Ki Havayu Elikim, B'shamayim Amal V'aretz Metochas Einoid. And secondly, for Aveda purposes, you can't serve properly if you don't go with Haseder V'adraga. You can't just jump. Just like we say, we grow as children into adults, Chomesh L'Mikra, Benesel L'Mishnah, Chameshes L'Gemara, and so on. So the same thing in Avedas Ha'adam, you go every day, Avedas Ha'Tfilah. You start first with Moedani and Birchas HaShachar, and then comes Psukkah de Zimra, and then Birchas Krishma, and Shemoneh Esrei. It's climbing Sulam Mutzav Arza, climbing a ladder. You can't climb to the top of the ladder if you don't go in step 1, step 2. Zman L'Zman, as this explains, we have an ability to jump, to leap, either through tshuva or through an aveda that is Mesiras Nefesh. But that's not the Tmid and Kesidron. That's not the orderly Seder, especially one that's integrated and internalized. And for it to be Pnimiyazdik, you can't jump, you can't become suddenly Ben Chamesh Es L'Gemara if you didn't have Ben Chamesh L'Mikra. So therefore, understanding the Seder Shtalshlus and each Madrega is also helping us understand how we can grow in our Aveda. So just like we say every morning, every Krishma we say several times a day, V'haftas Hashem L'kecha b'chol vavcha, b'chol nafshecha, b'chol meidecha. You don't jump to b'chol meidecha before you have b'chol nafshecha, b'chol vavcha, b'chol nafshecha. So wherever you turn, you'll see everything is with Seder Mesudim. Even the month of Tishrei we're coming from. And there you could say there is a certain leap. Nevertheless, also say there's Rosh Hashanah, says Simei Tshuva, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, every day, Kol Yema Avodah Vidita. So every day. So essentially, that was the main focus of the two things. And the third thing I've been focusing on is also how it helps us understand Ardus Hashem by explaining each Madrega. Because at the end of the day, all these Madregas are just a way for us to connect with the Eibishter in ways that we, as I said, b'seder v'adraga. So every step is necessary in this, we'll call interface or memutza in Seder Shtalshlus. So with that in mind, and I've repeated it many times in different shiurim, so we're up to, after going through all those dagas, and it's all been recorded, if anybody wants to go back, it's all on the Kail website. On the Kail website, all these different shiurim, probably by now at least 30, if not more, that I went through all these madregas. So we're up to Bria Yetzirah. And that's to sum up what we've learned. And I also wanted to refer to a letter from the Rebbe, which I mentioned, but I wanted to look inside, read it inside. It's a very interesting letter. So in the context of Olamos, even though the word is Olamos, as I pointed out, they're not planets. They're really madregas. It's 4 dimensions, if you wish, or 4 paradigms, if you want a fancier word. But they are 4 stages in any process, and we discussed it. Anything you do, even a business plan, or building a building, or creating, or writing a book, or composing music, you go through 4 general steps for it to be a healthy structure. First, you have to have a vision. What's your vision? What do you imagine? What do you want to have? That's Atzilus, Elam Achdus. That's how the Eibishter envisions existence. So it has Eidus and Kalim and there's Svirus. There's a structure. But it's not focused on the building itself, so to speak, but it's focused on the Kavonas Elokis, the Kavona Elokis in the building. So it's like the architect envisioning what kind of home or structure he wants to have. Then comes the actual process of building. And when you build, it also is in stages. You don't just build a final product. First you have an outline. You always have to have an outline, sometimes called a skeleton. The general outline, just like you make an outline, like when you see in the beginning of a sefer, a mafteach inyanim, in the topics that will be addressed. Or in a business plan, several chapters, a few prakim, details of the prakim. Then you flesh it out, that's more the Bria, Yesh, the Bria say Yesh. But it's a chemer without a tzura, and then you tzira from the word tzura, you give it shape and form. Then you flesh out each section. Each detailed section, you break it down into the details. And then the final step is Asiya, is the final product. So if you go anywhere you see a construction site, and if you follow the steps, you'll see they always go through these steps. So there's always a blueprint that the architect created, and everyone follows that blueprint. You know, which room will be where, which floor will be where, so on. Then there's you'll see often when a building is being put up, after they put the foundation, you'll just see an outline. You can't even know what's going to happen. You just see the main beams and the main general structure. Then on the next stage, you start seeing it start taking shape and form. You see the tzura. And then the final product is when Seif Maisa Machshav Etchil, the end is Asiya, is finished. And the same way Rashi says, Bereshis bara Elokeinu Shemayim v'sa'aretz, everything was created, Maimer Echad, Bereshis, like in a concentrated nucleus, and a concentrated like seed. And then it develops. Look at a child's development. It doesn't begin a full-blown child with Ramach Evarim and Shasai Gidim. It starts off as a seed fertilizing an egg. You have one cell upon conception, and then comes slowly the Yetzirah Savlad. which is in stages, the first trimester, second, third, and at some point, you could today with different technologies, actually can see the development. It takes time. But suddenly, so you mamish see the Seder of Atzilus, B'riyah, Yetzirah, Asiyah everywhere. Now, in our context, what we need to understand is how the Eibishter created the world. And also, as I said, how we reverse the process by climbing from Asiyah to Yetzirah to B'riyah to Atzilus. So if you think of any particular thing in life, and I use this all the time in my work, when you want to help people, advise people on different issues they're struggling with or dealing with. So let's take Chesed. It's a classic example. Chesed is, as we know, the midah of Chesed is the midah of love and kindness. Ava. So you can ask the question, what kind of Ava does a person have? Is it on the Atzilus level, is it on a B'riyah level, on a Yetzirah level, or an Asiyah level? What that simply means, and I discussed this a few shiurim back, just again reviewing it, always healthy to review. So for instance, Asiyah on a Chesed and Asiyah level is what we'd call biological Chesed. You know, the natural love that every person has to someone that's close to them. But it could be very biological, or to use the language that we use, Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chai, Yechida, also corresponds. Nefesh is the Asiyah, Ruach is Yetzirah, Neshama is B'riyah, and Atzilus is Chaya, and Kesed is Yechida, or Olamos Ein Sof is Yechida. So on a Nefesh level, it's the basic thing, just like you have natural love of a father and mother to a child. It doesn't necessarily have any profound inner work. It's biological. It's the way we're wired. It's basically more like reactive. You react, that's how we react. When you like someone, that you love someone, they're part of your life, they're part of your family, is natural love. Ruach, or in the world of Yetzirah, the love is already far more, a deeper love. It's more, you work on these emotions. It's with the Aveda. In B'riyah, it's even deeper. In Atzilus is the Ava in its purest form, as it's rooted in the Etzem HaNeshama, meaning how the Eibishter has Ava to us and how we have Ava to the Eibishter. So whenever you see, let's say, in a relationship, a problem between, let's say, husband and wife, or between parent and child, or between friends, so you can immediately identify, if you look closely and you're trained, where is this Ava, where does it stand? Is it a Asiyah Dika Ava? For most people, it's Asiyah. That's why they have problems. Because whenever you start from the vision, from Atzilus, like, why did you get married in the first place? What was the common denominator that connected the two of you? Many people who have, let's say, Shalom Bayis issues, Rahman al-Islam, sometimes they lose sight of the Ikr, and they make a Tofla Ikr and a Ikr a Tofel. So Atzilus is like focusing on the Ikr. Where does it all originate from? We know in the Torah it says that the Eibishter Nibara Elokim Sa'adam Sa'achan Nikeva Bara Esam. Both are two halves of Atzalim Elokim. When you're able to connect to that part of what Ava, where Ava is rooted in its true place, it's far easier to solve problems. I know it's easier said than done, but I'm just talking conceptually now. However, when it comes down to levels of B'riyah, Yetzirah, Asiyah, there the love is already on a level of either the creation level or formation or shape and form level or action level. And that's where it can be more complicated. So in that healthy relationship, you always want it to go from Atzilus downward, not the opposite. So when you ask people, for example, I have to ask them, who are you? And they give you their business card, and you tell them, well, that's what you do. That's not who you are. That's not who you are. You're not a carpenter. You are. That's your job. You're not a business person. That's, again, your job. Who are you is your neshama, the reason that Hashem created you. And then there's that's the etzem. That's, I call it the atzilus within you, the tahirahi. Neshama shenasat be tahiri. What you do is already how it manifests in this world. And unfortunately, for many people, what they do defines who they are, when it really should be the opposite. Who you are, in other words, your neshama should define what you do, not what you do defines what your neshama. In other words, your goof shouldn't be telling your body, your body shouldn't be telling your soul what to do, your soul should be telling your body what to do, which is the essence of what Tanya is all about, the milchama between these two forces. So I'm not going to go through the whole discussion on exactly how you fight this battle. It's not negated to this particular shir. I just wanted to explain how you can take these four elements, and by looking at them closely, you can actually apply it, because the keiches hanefesh are nishtalshul mehen from the spheres. So your keiches have all four dimensions. You have that atzilus within you, the b'riyah within you, the Yetzirah and Asiyah. And like I said, we say every morning, Neshamas and Nesata Bi, everyone says. Tahiri at the Barasa, at the Yetzat, at the Nefachta Bi. So it's a beferish tefillah that everybody says. I don't know how much kavanah and how much we understand the meaning of it, but when you think about it, what you're really doing is essentially discussing your 4 dimensions within you, and they go in that order. It starts from Tahira, it doesn't start from Nefachta Bi, Ba'ata Meshamra B'Kirbi. In different terms, where people, I was just, 2 weeks ago, I gave a course to a few life coaches. And I wanted to hear from a Chassidish point of view how I would add something to their work and how they coach people. So I said, in life coaching, the most important thing is like in everything in life. You have to always begin with your matara. What's your tachlis? What are you looking for? If you start saying, I'm looking for it to be able to pay my bills, that's the means. That's an emtsoi. To pay your bills means to be able to live. But why do you want to live? And why do you want to pay your bills? What's the ultimate goal? In the English language, it's called, what's the mission statement? What's the mission? And that's like the atzilus and everything. The ultimate, what is the real purpose of everything? The tachlis. So we know, like it says, these are expressions that define why you're here. Then comes the next question, how? That's the what. The how is, how are you going to implement that in your life? But you always have to begin with that matara. So in life coaching, what you want to teach someone is find out what is it you really want to accomplish. Now, that's not always an easy question to answer, but you're looking for that. What do you want to really get to? You want to become a billionaire? Is that your goal? So then ask why. What are you going to do with the money? Oh, when I'll have money, then I'll be able to make all the choices. But most people do not have a clue why they're here. So the first thing is always to know why. What's the matara? What's your destination? Then you say, okay, how am I going to get from here to there? But how could you define how you're going to get there if you don't even know where you want to get to? You want to go to Israel? You have to travel this way. You want to go to Africa? You travel a different way. Actually, from here, it's both in that direction, but you get the idea. So the point is that everything has to begin with a matara, and then you move into how you get there. So that's where the Olamos come to very practical application. I'm just giving some examples. There are infinite amount of examples that everybody can apply. I just want to make it very real. And it's not just some abstract thing. You learn the Maimorim are teaching the very dynamics of it. That's what a Maimor is. It's like teaching, just like Lahavdil. You look at a medical journal, it'll teach you what a human body biology looks like. It'll give you all the so-called coordinates, all the details. It's like dissecting the anatomy of something. But if you understand why do we need to know about these Olamos? The truth is, it's what helps us understand the structure of our lives and how structured it is, and ultimately, as I said, to understand how what's the Eibishter's kavon. So Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Oves Hein Amarkava. They were Atzilus Eden. They were people from Atzilus. They lived their lives completely aligned with what the Eibishter wanted every second. Alter Rebbe says 24/7. Then the neshamas of Bria from Yetzirah and Asiyah. And the lower the neshama, the lower its consciousness is of what the divine kavanah is. That doesn't mean we can't reach there. That's our Aveda. And for them, it's a different Aveda. But the point is, that's the difference between neshama of Atzilus and neshama and Asiyah. So, with that so-called overview, which, as I said, is really for all the shiurim, let's go back now where we're up to is Bria to Yetzirah. So I wanted to pause just to stop a moment and read a few sections from a letter from the Rebbe, which I mentioned in an earlier class. It's a letter written on Aleph El Tov Ches. So it's Igris Kedesh, Chelik Beis, page Shinayin Gimel, if you want to look it up, 373. It's Igeres Shin Gimel, Shin Sadik, sorry. The letter is Shin Sadik, and it's written to Hatomim Yehuda Leib Bistritsky. So many of you know the Bistritsky family. This is their grandfather, who lived here many years in Crown Heights, the head of Atzola. He has many children here in Israel and Tzfas. His son was Olav Shalom Rabbi Levi Bistritsky. This is Yehuda Leib, I said, Yehuda Leib, yeah. Levi Bistritsky was the chief rabbi of Tzfas. So it's an interesting letter. I just want to read some sections of it. She says, Michtove kibalti, hine ashaylas sheshayel einem klotz kashas, klesheni b'michtove. I'll just translate for those that want translation. I received your letter, and the questions you asked, they're not klotz kashas as you write in your letter. Because he apparently, as we'll see in a moment what the questions are, he wrote a letter, and then he apologized to the Rebbe, essentially. I even asked him about it, because when he was around, I once asked him about this letter, and he said, yeah. He was a bocher, he was trying to learn Chassidus, and he was trying to understand, so he wrote to the Rebbe's klotz kashas. So he's like apologizing why he's asking these like Nadisha questions. And the Rebbe says, it's not klotz kashas. V'adarabba, neigim hem binyanim yisedim, they're touching upon fundamental subjects, el shemipnei shahurgelu bahem, because people got used to them, ein masimim lev l'teichnam. They don't pay attention to their content. They take it for granted. It's like when you learn many times the words Atzilas, Bri, Yetzirah. You stop giving thought. You're just repeating words. Ze gufa shemishtamshim behem leitim tchufes gerim shenidma shemuvonim hem letachlisam. This itself, that people use these leitim tchufes in time to time. So nidma, the Rebbe underlines the word nidma. People imagine, or people delude themselves into thinking that they're understood completely. Though after iyun, after the delving into it, becomes obvious that most of them are still not understood and comprehended. So in other words, it's not klotz kashas. It's just that some people got used to using the words, so they, someone asked, what's mamala kalam? Say, well, kalam. I'm sure all of you will have something to say. You look at this, you know the words. But when you really start digging deeper, and someone who doesn't know what mamala kalam says, so why do I need to know this? You realize that you may be missing the point. So that's what the Rebbe is telling him, it's not klotz kashas. Now, the Rebbe says, v'cheinu b'chol chochma mada, and the same is true with all wisdom and all knowledge, all science as well. The part that needs the most iyun and depth, those are the parts that include the axioms, the muskolas l'shenish, which means the fundamental principles. From that particular respective science or school of thought and its foundations. So in other words, if someone will say to you 2 + 2 = 4, fine. But someone will ask you, why do we need to know numbers, the set of numbers? What's the yesod of the muskal rishon? Not everyone could answer that question. So in other words, a lot of things that we know, we assume it's a given. I remember when I was teaching in one of the mezdas here, so in the beginning of the year, I would always ask the students to write a short paper, 1 page or 2 pages. Why are you frum? Why are you frum? And I remember the first time I suggested it, some of the students didn't exactly, they were a little surprised. Some of them actually went to complain to the Anhola that I'm asking a question that everyone, Nasav and Ishma, Kabbalah Sale, what do you mean why I'm frum? The Eibishter said you should be frum. But my point was to make them think. Are you frum because your parents are frum and you grew up with it? Are you frum because you studied all the different options, like Yetzirah, and you came to understand Atiyah Daiti, that Torah mitzvah is emes lamite? Are you frum because your neshama feels it? There's a lot of ways, a lot of reasons. So my point was to make them think in a way where based on the same idea that Rebbe is saying here, to understand what is the muskal rishon. Sometimes we take for granted. And that's why it's easy for us to talk to people like yourself. It's easy to explain something. Try to explain something to someone that doesn't have the same Yeseda you do, and you suddenly realize, 1 second, I don't necessarily have all the answers. So that Rebbe is essentially saying that in every Mada, in Chochmah, you have Chochmah Mada, the chilik that needs most explanation and is the thing that is the fundamental Yeseda. So it's not klotz kashas b'kitzur. Shailas elu misug zeh, and these type of questions, from this category that's talking about the fundamental Yesodis, the axioms, are difficult to explain in a letter. Especially now, the Rebbe said doesn't have time to. The Rebbe wasn't Rebbe yet, by the way. It's Tov Shen Ches. So there's no time to be Meidach, so the Rebbe says, I'll write B'kitzur. Here's the Shaila. So I wanted to read the Akdama because I thought it was also good to hear the Rebbe writing very clearly how you're supposed to think. That you don't take anything for granted. You have to begin with the Yesod. Like why do you assume something? Very many classes I give and so on, I'll often say that there are certain assumptions of this class. If you want to understand, like for example, we are assuming that God exists and God created the world and He gave the Torah. If someone wants to understand why do we assume that, that's another class. Then we have to discuss. We're going to talk about the rayas that Hashem exists, or how do you know Torah is emes. But you can't always in every class explain every yisod and every muskal rishon. Even though in truth is that's where you should always begin. So, but it puts things into that context. So this is where I really want to go with the Olamos. The Shaila that he asked, the Rebbe writes, Shaila mepnei ma nikra elam atzilus elam hanelam b'kol chai, elam abriya elam hakisei, elam hayetzirah elam hamalochim, elam asiya elam hagalgalim. So the Rebbe is addressing the question that this Leibel Bestrutsky asked as a bocher, that there's a name that Atzilus is called, Elam Nelam B'kol Chai means a world that's concealed from all of us. Bri is called the world of the throne, Kisei HaKoved. Yetzirah Elam HaMalochim, the world of angels. And Asiya is Elam HaGalgalim. And the Rebbe gives now the tshuva. Hine kol dover hanasa b'seichel v'chachma yesh b'kavona v'tachlis. So you'll see some of the ideas I shared today and other classes are literally also an explanation of this letter, or based on this letter. Everything that's created with seichel and chachma and wisdom has a purpose, has a kavona and a tachlis, an intention and a tachlis. What is the Rebbe saying? That if it's not a pi seichel, if somebody that is not using seichel can go and build something and doesn't have to have a kavona, it's tam nonsense. But if it's built with the seichel and chachma, it's going to have a purpose. That you build a machine, you build a technology, whatever it is that you build has a kavanah v'tachlis. But mele muven asher hein klolos hadover hein protov tzarich lis beifin kazeh asher tismala hatachlis. But mele it's understood that all the details, both the general thing that you created and the details have to be in such a manner that is going to fulfill the tachlis. So for example, you see a house, and you look at a room and you say, I don't know why this room is necessary. Okay, so you have to go back to the architect and find out what was the purpose. And then you realize, even though I didn't understand, there was a purpose. So there's no such thing as a detail. You build a machine, every detail is necessary. So now the Rebbe says with that klal, Hine tachlis b'ris ha'elamis hediya razal ashur b'shvil ha'azgalus malchusei yizbarach. Rebbe calls Shar Yichud V'Amunah Reish Perek Zayin. So everything is to reveal God's sovereignty, God's presence, Malchus, His authority. U'kamurim is gamkim b'kra, Yeshaya, kol hanikra b'shmi u'lekvedi, barosav yetzartiv af asisiv, u'kamesha dashua ba'ovis soif Perek Vav. Okay, I mentioned this earlier. That everything, Shmi is lekvedi, it's created lekvedi. That's the rai that kol ma shabara kosh baruch b'elam elei elu lekvedi. What's kvede? That's malchusei. To glorify, to honor, to respect, to accept godliness. And then it says, Barosav yitzad v'af asisiv. Okay. V'hine kamoishe b'chlal. Kol anyon shel mati yesh lam sheirish l'mayla. Came befrat b'malchusa d'rekia nishtal shel malchusa da'ar. So the way it is in general, that everything below has a root above, like we discussed earlier, like nishtal shel mehen. If you have keiches hanefesh, the human faculties is evolved from the Esesfiris, God's attributes. So it came befrat, also specifically malchusa d'rekia, like the Chazal say, nishtal shel malchusa da'ara. That Malchus below on earth evolved from Malchus above. So just like from the way it is Malchus above in heaven, you can know the minhagi, the customs of Malchus on earth. The Rebbe gives the Marmekemis. Chenu gam leidach gisa. Asher b'rdei lahaven efes k'tseyu m'malchusa d'reki yesh lilmed al pi heiros chazal m'malchusa da'ara. The same as the other way around. That from looking at how malchus on this earth runs, you can learn about that, about the malchus of the Eibishter. Okay. Al yidei kol zeh moving lashon hamurgel b'midrashim Moshe Lamelech. So many times you see in the Medrash, you'll see the words Moshe Lamelech. V'oid yeser mizeh be'echa rabba b'tchilosei asher Omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'malachi asharis melech bas v'dam ma darke la'asesi kach ani eisa. So basically, the Rebbe is explaining that's why so many Medrashim will say, what do we, ma'adavar dema? L'moshel melech basar v'dam. How could we learn from a human being about God? Because that's the way the Eibishter created it. Like we discussed earlier, He created this world, ke'ein malchusa d'rakia, and mipsari echzel lekah, and He created a world that from it we can learn things about the Eibishter. That's how the Eibishter made it. It's not saying that the human being is greater than God. God forbid, the opposite. The Eibishter created us in a way that the human and Malchus Lamata can teach us about Malchus Lamayla. Okay. I'm already reading the whole letter, I see, but why not? It's an interesting letter. V'chama protim lamdunu razal memelech bos v'dam v'efen hamelucha lamata. And there's a number of details that Rebbe now spells out, things we learn from Malchus below to Malchus above. You'll see in a moment how it's connected to the worlds and all of that. Anshe hamelucha tzarich liz bavdol rabba min hamelech. It's one example. That the people, the subjects of a king, meaning the people that the king governs, they need to be bavdol rabba. They're not equals. We don't just enter into the king's palace whenever we want. There's havdalah. Nifrodim v'zorim v'rechekim kalosh natanya sham. And he brings here from the Rambam. I'm just going to skip quickly. The Rambam brings halachas and hilchas malachim. Masimin lo eima v'yira v'lo yamid b'fnei odom mipnei odom v'lo yedaber rachus. Bottom line, all the halachas of Yiras HaMelech and Koved HaMelech that we have in halacha. Why? B'chol zeh yikablu l'melech aleim ki makirim b'gdulosei hakorek tzas al koponim. So we see one thing we see that the people in a nation, an empire, are not in the same level as the king. They have to respect him and recognize him as being superior to them. Gam, as much as he's the melech over the people, that's not kol inyoneh. That's not his homahus. Ki hu ish hamayla beinei lebein atzmei ela shekshurei im ha'am hu ha'idei zeh shemelech shmei nikra aleim umanhigam. So the second thing is that we have to know that the melech is beyond being a melech. He has a life of his own as well. Okay, then the Rebbe continues. Tchunas ha'melech, and he's continuing this point, beinei lebein atzmei ein la'am kol shaychus lezeh. That this, what the king has about on his own, with his own family or with himself, is b'chal has no shaychus to the am altogether. He's b'shalei be'erach to them. You sent me the second page as well, right? Yeah. And that's why Razal say, let me just see, I'm moving from one page to the next. Give me a minute. That's the remez of Chazal. Ein rein esik kishu orim. That we don't see a melech as he's without clothing, because it's his own world. It's not your business to know what's going on by the melech in his own private place. Then he says there's the next step. There's when the melech, kishu melech, al am u'mitzayir b'nafshi v'chachmosei tzerchei ha'am. So the first step is the melech as he is privately in his own world. We'll soon see that's Atzilus, Nela Makol Chai. But then there's the melech as how he imagines and he envisions the tzerchei ha'am, the needs of the nation, of the people. So even there, adayin ein ha'am rei esam. It's within the melech, he's imagining what his nation, what his people need. So that's step 2. Achachach Yetzirah Melech lepalterin shalei v'yeshiv al kisei malchusei. Then the king comes out from his inner sanctum, where he sits on the kisei, where he is associating with the people. Al pi ha'hechlet chachmosei shebenafshei pnimei mitzvah la'asorim mitzvah la'asorim al derech ifani anhogas hamedina. So now he's already ruling and governing the people. And sometimes he also notifies l'pomim ma'idiyah gam atam al zeh muvan asher behechel pnima va'amelech yeshiv al kisei ein nemtzoyim sham yechelim. What's the word here? L'shcheyach al hamelech ve'ein lehem tzedek klal b'rayis asher yeshna melech. Now, when the king is already on this level, even though people may not see him, but everyone knows that he's ruling and governing them. Aval harei rotzen hamelech hu sha'am asher bekatzvei medinosei yisnagu al pi heirasei. Lechen yetzim shluchim u'pekudas hamelech biyodam ve'ein tam ha'pekuda klal le'idiyam l'chol b'nei hamedina. The next step is the Melech himself doesn't go. He sends shluchim to pass on to all the people in the country, in his empire, what he wants. And with that, the Rebbe then goes back and says, he says, the king on his own is lifnei tzimtzum. When he is envisioning the nation, Elam Atzilis. Nikra Elam, it's called Elam. Kari kfar tzayir b'chachmosei tzarchi ha'am. Aval nelam ein kol chai kanal she'en ha'am re'enes ezeh. So it's still within the king, but he's already envisioning existence, the Am. Yetzirah lepalterin, when he goes out and sits on his throne, Elam abriya shesham bedugmas melech yeshiv al kisei v'anivroim bebitl al mediskasya canal. Lamatmezeh malochim shluchim yetzim. That's when the king sends his shluchim to the people all over the country. Elam hayetzirah v'ayidei levush mizgalim gam be'elam asiyah ubkudes biyadeim kosher posel zakei chayev. Here the melech, the Eibishter, is already giving us Torah and telling us exactly what he wants from us. The actual pkudas, the actual orders that we hear from the king. Ad shemagia gam lekatzvei hamedina le'elam hayeseh tachten elam hagalgalim haklulim menefesh v'guf. That's elam asiyah. V'shemehem yotzu kol habriya shebe'elam hashofel. And it's going all the way to all the briyas, all the creations in this lowest of worlds. And that's how the letter ends. B'brocha la'alta l'tshuva la'alta l'gula, and the Rebbe signs his name. So because time is a little late, I'm going to explain it next week more in detail. But you see here a fascinating letter where the Rebbe takes a physical example and explains the Elamis, starting from Lifnei Tzimtzum, Atzilas B'ri Yetzirah Asiyah, in a way of very essentially different levels of how we relate to the Eibishter. But I want to elaborate more because obviously it's a very profound concept. But this was the Rebbe's answer to Abocher, who asked Klotz Kashas. And so I think we can learn a lot from this. So I'll stop here. Everyone have a good day, and we'll continue next week.